Welcome to A2 Aesthetics, The Body Show. On today's episode, we'll be exploring sex and sexuality within a social, cultural context. Joining us today to have a frank and insightful discussion on sex is Dr Victorine Mbong Shu. This charming and vivacious doctor is a multiple award-winning author of 8 books, covering themes from family finance, motherhood, involved parenting, and sex communication between adolescents and parents. She is also an esteemed speaker, a policy advisor on family and sexuality communication, media consultant, and is deeply committed to strengthening families and empowering the next generation. Also fondly known as Mama Vicky, this very beautiful and busy academic is also a wife and a mother of 4. Welcome, Dr. Mbong Shu.
Thank you so much, my sister. Good to be here. And hello to the listeners and viewers.
Wonderful to have you. Can we go back in time a bit? I'm talking a couple of decades. You completely changed the path of your life through education. Reflecting, did you ever think you'd be sitting here with a PhD under your belt?
Never. Not given where I come from, where the girl child was seen as a good, as somebody who has to get married and reproduce. So I saw myself, even when I studied, I saw myself as a TV journalist. That was, I could tell. I'd never thought about the qualifications.
I know a bit about your journey, but just to reflect a bit for the viewers, you came here as a teenager from Cameroon.
A young adult, yes.
A young adult. And times were tough.
They were tough and they were blurry. They were very tough and blurry. But I think before even coming to South Africa, the blurry path actually started when I was 14. My parents' marriage broke. So my mom I'm a 4th child. The 3 older children had been brought up by my grandparents, and then my mom took the 5 children behind me. And so I stayed with my dad. The reason is because I didn't want to go with my mom. My mom's village didn't have a secondary school, and I was in secondary school. So here in South Africa, you call it high school. I was in secondary school. I was in Form 3 going to Form 4, which is, I think, grade 10. I was grade 9 going to grade 10 years. So I thought if I went with my mom, that would be the end of my education. I decided to stay with my dad. But unfortunately, my dad's relationship after my mom, the lady didn't want me around. So many other things happened that would take a whole day to talk about. And then my older brother, so my class master, who is a class rep teacher, sent a letter to my older brother, who was a security guard in our capital city, Douala, to come fetch me. And in that letter, he said 2 things. He said to my brother, if you don't come fetch your sister, she might fall pregnant or she might contract a sexually transmissible disease. So according to my brother, those 2 things actually got him nervous. He took permission from work, traveled during the day, come fetch me, and we traveled over the night back. And what actually made me educated today is that when my brother came to fetch me, I didn't pack my clothes, but I packed my books, And he found that very profound. He found that I was almost 15 then, but how can a 14-year-old pack just books and not take clothes? So he went and he swore to himself, I was almost 16 because time had evolved. And he said to himself, you're 16 now. I'm going to work. I'm going to make sure you study to the end before I ever study. My brother dropped out of school and sent me to school.
Wow. It's a very inspiring start, but also a very hard start. The sacrifices that families make as well, siblings. Jump forward to today. You've just finished your PhD, where you finished in 2024, focused on sex and sexuality communication in African families, and very specifically about the dynamics of openness and closeness. Please explain, Vera.
I love my topic. I really do. And the reason is because when I started off, I had no interest in studying sex communication. I wanted to study adolescent consumption habit because my daughter, when she was 10, she used my card to purchase accommodation in Sun International. I don't know how they allowed it, but she purchased 3 nights hotel stay for 2 without my authority. And I just didn't understand how my child purchased online when I had never shopped online. So I wanted to research and find out how adolescent children actually get consumer habits that their parents don't have, And I started sending out my proposal, which I still have, and hope that I'll give it to somebody one day to study. But ironically, I got a call from the University of the Free State inviting me to come study sex communication. That was the first time I heard about something like that. And I was a bit embarrassed. And I was like, oh God, is my sex life out there? What is happening? Am I a sex monger? Is it because I have 4 children and people think I've had so much sex? Or is it that I don't have sex? What is going on? So I questioned the gentleman who called me. And he said to me, our HOD is your friend on Facebook, and he has noticed that you do a lot of social media posting on sex, and he has also noticed that you have published a book titled Sex. So he would like you to formalize this by gaining an academic qualification. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that for me was very profound, but also it was a bit of a shameful thing. So it took me, that call came in September 2019. And it took me like 5 months to actually accept to go study. And I wouldn't have accepted if lockdown had not come. So because of lockdown, I had nothing doing. I was bored. So I went back to the university and I said to them, I'm ready to study. My study explored how parents with children ages 10 to 19 are communicating sex with their children. But it also explores how these children are communicating with parents. So it's a two-way thing. How do parents communicate with children, and how do children communicate with parents? The dynamics of closetness and openness actually talks about, it's not about coming out of the closet like some people have thought in the gay and lesbian community. It's about how close the conversation have been and how open people are about the conversations.
Fantastic. I have read part of your articles. When I have time, I'll read the whole thesis.
Please, Dean, please do.
So, just on like layman's terms, why is it so important for a family to talk about sex openly?
That's a very profound question, my friend. I think for me, the reason why people should talk sex is the reason why I studied sex. When I was at that point in my life where should I go for consumer habit or should I go for sex communication? What prompted me to accept the offer from the University of the Free State was a trigger to the fact that once a child loses their sexual identity, they can never regain it, no matter how hard they work. But when a child loses money, they can always get it back in many other ways. They can work hard, they can be gifted, they can steal, they can do anything. They would always have that money. And they can always rework their consumer habit. But when you lose your sex identity, even as a parent, we are struggling today to have children who are sexually acceptable because we are not good sex role models to our children, and we are not communicating sex effectively due to the aspect of culture, like the topic of our podcast is saying. Culture silences sex communication. Culture is the reason why we reject sex. Culture, religion, societal stigmatization, So that was my biggest prompt to say we need to talk about this because children need their identities to unfold in acceptable manners.
You also do family and marriage counseling.
Coaching.
Yes.
Right.
Can you just elaborate? I suppose this is from an academic perspective. why it's important to have intimacy within a relationship, within a marriage.
Let's get this clear. Are you talking about sex or intimacy?
Talking about sex.
Thank you. I like it to be called by its name. And the reason is also because we shy away from that and then we misdirect our intentions. It's very important to say sex. Just say it, Okay, jokes aside. It is important in the sense that sex is a form of connection. Many people think sex is a satisfaction journey. It's not. When I speak to my clients, I say to them, you don't have sex because you want to satisfy your partner. You have sex because you need a connection with your partner, which is the reason why if you have a friend that has not gone sexual, you almost never find yourself obligated to behave in a certain manner towards or with that person. But once you have gone sexual, it sort of changes everything. It changes the dynamics of that friendship or that relationship. So is marriage. When you're in a relationship that is intended to last, you have to make sure that your sexual vibes are activated, regularly checked, and almost always modified.
I like that. Your sexual vibes must be activated. Yes. So sex, and particularly sexuality, remains a very sacred and private space in many African cultural and religious contexts. So you specifically focused on that. But is this not a global issue?
Are you talking about my focus to African culture?
Yes.
You see, that's the most beautiful question you've asked me today. And the reason is when I was approached, my excitement to take up this topic actually almost gave me the assumption that I would find research on the topic. But when I started doing it, all the research I saw was Western. I saw very little or nothing on Africa. Actually, there's nothing on my topic on Africa. Nothing. There is similar where you would talk about sexuality and leave out sex, or sex. I never really saw anything on sex, but the focus is mostly on sexuality. Defining the concept, most often sex is look at penetrative reaction, right? Your attraction to somebody sexually is penetrative, right? And sexuality is looking at your orientation, how you feel towards others. So you hardly really get the sex part of it. And I'm so glad that I had to pioneer something like this for the continent, Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So just putting it out there, the ground has been broken, making way for other academics. Fantastic. Moving into the nitty-gritty. When parents don't speak to their children, the social media, everyone's got data, Wi-Fi, the internet, porn is so accessible. And I just want you to, just reiterate a bit more, because if there isn't a role model telling and educating and helping to educate their child, they will find it somewhere else and not necessarily.
That's very true. You're talking like a parent, right?
Yes.
And I'm talking like a parent. Let's be frank to each other. Most of us, you and me, when we look at our children, we don't look at them as sexual beings. We look at them as children. That is how culture and religion has programmed us. If I have to talk about my participants, the research participants, most of the parents who had children that were between 10 and 19 actually denied to me that their children are sexually active. I think only 2. One of them had caught a condom and the other one had heard that her son was sexually active. Those are the only 2 of the 20 participants. Flip it, the children. I interviewed young adults who spoke about their lives as adolescents. The children told me all of them were sexually active. All of them were sexually active. And one of them said something very profound that I'd like our audience to hear. He said to me, Mom, we show our parents the sexual part of us that they want to see, not what we are. That goes back to your question about talking and role modeling our children, So a child would look at you, a 13-year-old would look at you, and you show no indication that they know about erection.
Yes.
They'll never talk to you about erection, even when you see them erected. So, but what will happen is when they go out and they're with their peers, or when they wonder what is happening to them, they will tell their peers, they'll go like, I have erection, I don't know what's happening. And their peers will tell them that when you have an erection, it means you should get sexual. Okay. That is not true. That is misleading. And that child will go get sexual because the parent has not communicated with them. Or that child will say to them, go Google it. And you know what happens. Once you put that word on a search engine, it doesn't take you to the definition of erection. It shows your pictures, and now your child is hooked. So basically, what am I saying? These children desire us to talk to them about erection even before their first erection. And we have to talk to them with content. Another boy told me when he had an erection, his grandmother called him in and said to him, that thing that is standing there, that thing like that can make a woman pregnant. And now he didn't even know. So each time he had an erection, he would run away because he's thinking his erection will make a woman pregnant. The grandmother didn't tell him if you have sex. So the content of how we also talk to our children, if we do talk, can lead or mislead them.
So I went on the Google, and this is from the South African government website.
Okay.
The recent statistics paint a very grim picture. Okay, so this is from 2024. Over 90,000 pregnancies were recorded in young girls between the ages of 10 and 19.
Yeah.
Now, parents are not talking to them. Leaders are not talking to them. What advice can you give to younger girls who are watching and find themselves in that position? Because most of the time they drop out of school and then the education stops and your life changes dramatically.
In my thesis, I actually quote the then Premier of Gauteng hailing a pregnant teenager for bracing the pregnancy and getting into matric to write her math exam. I find that very wrong. Personally, it could be right for anyone and the culture in which we live, And like you are saying, there's no leadership for our girls and boys. There's no leadership in no role modeling. I would say to them, sex steals your future. But pregnancy brings a burden. Because when you go to have sex unprepared, just the emotional connection to someone else when you're not mature is daunting.
Yes.
And then when you get pregnant, you have a burden of looking after your pregnant self, post-pregnant self, and the baby. No girl wants to go through that. Even those who are working desire to prepare themselves for that. So how about you who is still in school? And to parents, I would say, so my research also projects African parents in South Africa as always threatening their children and warning them. And one of the interviewees actually said to me, my parents used to say, if I fall pregnant, I will leave the house. But I fell pregnant at 16 and I didn't leave the house. So these children know that those threats are not serious.
Okay.
Yeah, so please get serious conversations with them because the threats are not helping. They need conversations.
So just within the South African context, we are still in a very patriarchal system. We, I think, as society are letting the youth down. But how do we address the scourge of gender-based violence, both on young ladies and young men?
You know, before we even talk about violence, the pregnant girls do not fall pregnant on their own. They do have sex. And most of them have sexual encounter with older men, which in itself is violence.
Yes.
With older men, with married men or men in already mature relationships. That to me already is violence. You know, one of the ways to address this is to come up with policies. I'll give you an example of many countries in West Africa where Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, teenage pregnancy is still treated as a taboo. And as a result, girls actually are wary of falling pregnant. But also men are not spared because in most cases, you are forced to look after that girl and the baby. And most people in mature relationship cannot bear that. So they try to be cautious. What I'm trying to say is policies have to be in place. But also discipline has to be instilled. A lot of the violence that happens here is actually caused by mothers.
Why did you say that?
Non-academic tone, the mother may, not based on research, not based on anything, but my individual perception is that mothers are the most significant role players in children's lives. And what I've seen in South Africa is that many mothers are particularly hostile towards the fathers of their children. And their sons are noticing. And those sons take that hostility to the opposite gender because for them they see it as opposite gender hostility. They don't see it as mother and father, father and mother. They see it as man, woman, woman, man, you know. And then secondly, mothers are the ones who are raising these boys. What are they teaching the boys who are now men? Because I feel like character is developed in a home. So mothers have to relook at how they are mothering. They need to relook at what they are instilling in their boys. And the boys also have to self-retrospect. Introspect or retrospect? Which one? Introspect. They have to self-introspect as they grow and know that violence is not acceptable. And then lastly, culturally, it's almost a perspective I'm taking but different. Violence is always seen as being provoked by a woman in many cultures. So what I mean is if a man hits a woman, they would ask, what did the woman do to be hit, to be murdered? You know, if a man rapes a woman, they will ask, how did she dress? So culture is also perpetuating a wrong discourse on how this should be viewed, how gender-based violence should be viewed. And it's very important that this is addressed. The last point I want to say is gender-based violence, as many people are articulating, is not just flowing from men to women. Women are also becoming very violent. Not just with their tongue as it has traditionally been, but we are also now acting on men. Because the new South African woman is becoming more economically empowered than the South African man. And we are abusing that also. So we need to address those four aspects.
It's very interesting what you're saying about women, but I just want to go back to that. Is because it could be seen in a different context as that men have to man up a bit and understand that whether it's their son or daughter, children need a father figure in their life. Yeah. And if that is lacking, I understand what you're saying about the woman, but I think from a different angle, the woman now is both the mother and the father.
Yeah.
Yeah, women have a lot on their shoulders. Yeah, that's true.
That's true. Can we talk on that a bit?
Yes, yes.
So I want to give you an example of my client that I saw yesterday. He is in a relationship where they had planned to get married. They didn't get married, but they've got a son, and they had been going through custody, and it had been put forward that the guy will stay with the man, will stay with the child on weekends, and the woman will stay with the child within the week because the child is in school. But he came yesterday to me with evidence where the woman actually went to her workplace and asked to be moved because to be transferred from Johannesburg to Cape Town, because she does not want the man who is now married to another woman to be involved in the child's life. And when I listen to you now, I wonder how this man can man up. The reality in the South African economy is that, South African space is that the women are not accepting that they are burdened. The women sort of think they own the children. Am I making sense? They are thinking they own children and they are highly depriving the men. And the men are acting out in anger. I'm not condoning what men are doing. I'm not saying what they are doing is right. Hence, in my third point, I had actually said they have to work on themselves. But I think women have to really accept the role that they are playing. One, in that they are the ones raising these men. If you raise a boy child and that child does not understand how to treat a woman, you should take responsibility. One. And two, if you take away a child from the father and that child detests another woman, which is now a girlfriend, you should see it as a child acting out the way you raised them. It actually means there was something wrong with your mothering, and you shouldn't allow your daughter to do that to their own child. But if you look at the South African families, the teenage pregnant families particularly, it's just replicating.
Yeah.
The mother took the child away and raised it. Now the daughter has taken the child away, is raising it. Now the granddaughter is taking. So it's replicating. It's a problem.
Now, South Africa has got one of the best democracies in the world now.
On paper, yes.
On paper. And I think the LGBTQ plus community does have a voice. But sometimes culturally it is hidden and not accepted. Why must parents listen to their children when they come out?
The agony that a child is loved with when they are not heard is not fixable, because that child completely loses themselves. If a child, for instance, a boy is gay, I'll call it by that, and the parents and the society where they stay would not tolerate them, it basically means that they have to pretend to be straight all their lives.
Yeah.
And that is what we call agony, because they will live in agony. Agony basically would mean that they would hate themselves.
Yeah.
They will hate everybody around them. And that is where all this bitterness towards the world is coming from. They would have no reason to live. And even if they live for the sake of daily bread. So they don't get motivated. There are just so many things that are a result of, that would come with the consequences of not tolerating children to talk, but also not tolerating them to act. Because gay is an act. Being gay is an act of acting. It's not just talking. A child doesn't say, I'm gay. A child acts gay. They have to be,
yes.
So it's important that we allow them to be, so that they can also live the fulfilled life that we are living.
And I think also out there, people are, maybe the older generation, grappling with that. Acceptance is so much part of our mental health.
Yes, definitely.
Our happiness, our passion.
Do you know that acceptance actually... This morning I was talking to somebody and I said to her, if you live in a society where you are accepted, you flourish to your best. In everything. Acceptance even determines how you eat. It determines how you exercise. It determines how you dress. It determines how you study. It just determines everything, acceptance or rejection. There is no midway. There is no can-a. You either have to be accepted or rejected. So most of these people who are unable to come out, they are living midway. And it's almost not possible to live midway.
One thing I'd really like to speak about, and you do touch on this, is why we shouldn't start a conversation talking about sex with, for example, the birds and the bees. Because it's got nothing to do with the birds.
Exactly. I don't find that making sense. You see, one of the biggest findings or acknowledgement of my study is that Africans don't pronounce words by what they are when they speak sex.
Okay.
So when I did interviews, one of the biggest concern of both the parents and the young adults is that when they were adolescents, they didn't understand their parents were talking about sex when they had sex talk, end quote.
Okay.
One woman told me that that her grandmother said to her, if a man puts a banana in your mouth, come tell me. So this woman was like, so now that she's grown up and she came to know about oral sex, she was like, how does a man get a banana? Like, how did the grandmom even get to that or at that to call a penis a banana? You understand? And then she added, if somebody had done that to me, and if somebody had sex with me, and I told my grandmother, and they took us to court, I was going to say that person put a banana, and that person would win the case because they had put a penis, not a banana. I found that very profound. But another one was what I just told you about a grandmother who said, if you have an erection, you will make a girl pregnant. How can that be? And then another one is when you see your period, instead of when you're menstruating, instead of your parents saying you are menstruating, you are now a matured woman, they will say to you, that thing that comes out means you can fall pregnant.
Okay.
No context, you know. So it's extremely educative for parents of African families, particularly, to call those things by names. There's nothing like bread and bee. I don't even know what bread and bee stand for. What is it? Is it penis? And I don't know. I have never been interested in reading up on that because it's extremely Western. And my focus is on African culture, African tradition, traditional ways of doing it, which was ritualistic. You know, it was very ritualistic in the sense that we would go to initiation homes. I've never been to one. When I grew up, when they were doing the initiation, my father didn't allow me to go. But my other siblings went, you know, and they really did enjoy it because they came back with lessons of sexual lessons. But there's a problem there. The boys were being taught on how to really handle a woman in bed.
Okay.
And the girls were being taught on how to cook for a man, how to seduce a man. They were never taught sex. So I don't know the right way to do it. I don't know any other way to do it correctly if we don't call them by name.
So you're saying as well, in terms of our cultural leaders, because we obviously have a lot of initiation schools in this country.
Yes.
They've got a huge challenge as educators as well, not just as carrying on a tradition.
Yes.
And in fact, these young boys have to be prepared for a more modern
life. Yes. And schools. So in my research, schools came up a lot. When we talk about parents not talking to their children, most of the parents actually said they started talking sex to their children after the children learned in school. So homework particularly would provoke them to talk to their kid. So the child will come home with homework and say, Mom, help me. Let's do the reproductive organ. And then that's when they will realize, oh. But now a challenge in that research is that teachers who are Black cannot pronounce the word sex, cannot pronounce the word penetration. They still say do. So we tell the children, don't do it. So again, culture is very important, but it teaches nothing if we don't articulate properly.
So we've got to use the correct biological terms. Absolutely, I agree. Perfect. You are full of information, but I just wanted to put it out there. If someone's watching and they're like, okay, I need help. I need to know more, or I'm going through the situation, where can they get help?
I think it depends on the kind of help. You know, help would be very unique. If you want to get help on identity development, for instance, it's very important that you start by reading. Before you go to professionals, read up on identity development. Identity development basically guides you on the changes that are going on in your body, in your mind, you know. Read up on those concepts. If you want to get help on sex, speak to therapists, speak to coaches, speak to psychologists, speak to counselors. All these people, they have job titles that are similar. If it's to an extent where you have to speak to a doctor, a medical practitioner as well. But for me, the starting point should always be in the family. You should always start at home before you go somewhere else. One of the issues that I had in my research was that parents said they don't have time to talk with their children. You know, but 1 minute can change a lot. So give your children the opportunity to talk to you for 1 minute every day. And it will make a lot of difference. They can talk sex, they can talk finance, they can talk identity. They don't have to preempt, they don't have to prepare to come talk to you. Another issue that came up was that once family communication is on appointment, they don't flow. Okay. They have to be naturally flowing. If you tell my child that, come at 8, let's talk, already it just blocks them because they think they're in trouble. They think you're becoming an investigator, you know. And it's the same thing with the parent. If the child says, Mom, Dad, I want to talk to you at 8 o'clock. My second child, Stacy, does that a lot. She writes a presentation and she goes like, Mom and Dad, I need to see you guys in the dining. I need to do a presentation. And then you go into that presentation and she wants to talk about pocket allowance. But before we get in there, we're thinking, what have we done wrong? My husband and I will run to the toilet. We get a small meeting and we go like, you're the one to talk. No, you're the one to talk. So we preempt, which is not really good. It blocks your natural creativity and natural flow, you know. So be spontaneous about these talks. Talk about them at home before you go out to search. So you understand your dynamics. The reason why it's good to talk in the family is to understand your family dynamics and how they are influencing who you are and how they have influenced who you were, how they are influencing who you are, and how they would influence who you're becoming.
Wise words, very wise words. Just before we wrap up, so how many times a week should we be having sex?
24 hours a day. 7 days a week, 31 days a month. Does that satisfy you, man?
Gosh.
That is a question I will never respond to because if I do and my husband watches this, he's going to hold me to task. So sex is a negotiation and sex is a renegotiation of your terrain, right? And I always say to my client, have as much sex as you can for as much time as you can permit and as much as you're willing to. Sex is healthy, very healthy.
Yeah. Well, you've heard it from the doctor. Sex is very healthy. Thank you so much, Mama Vicky, Dr Victorine Mbong Shu. You're a treasure. Really, thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everyone, all our viewers, for joining us. And until next time, keep living your best life. Thank you.
And keep having good sex.
And keep having good sex.